In this episode of The Gray Outdoors, we're talking about building a precision bolt gun, the tools required, the process that it takes, everything that you need to know about building your first high-end rifle. So be sure to stay tuned. So guys, like I said, in this episode, we're talking about how to build the bolt gun. I've got all of our parts laid out. I took apart one of my 308 trainer guns that I use a lot. You've probably seen it before on the channel. And I've got it all torn apart, literally about as far as you could, other than I didn't take the chassis all completely apart. And I didn't, take the scope off the scope rings, not showing that. But mainly want to show how to assemble a bolt gun. When I say building a bolt gun, I don't mean chucking a barrel up and reaming it out and threading the muzzle and making an action. I'm more so talking about I've ordered all the parts in. I've ordered myself an action, or maybe I already have an action and I ordered another barrel for it and I want to put it in a chassis and I want to do some other fun stuff to it. This is kind of showing how to build all of that and how to check all that so you're doing it the correct way and the safe way, really. So I've got all of our parts and all of our tools laid out. As far as tools go, you really don't need a whole lot. For the most part, basic stuff will get you a long way. But you will need some simple things like a good set of Allen bits, a good set of Torx bits. You're gonna need a barrel vise of some sort. So a barrel vise. You're going to need some sort of way to turn the action, either an action wrench or an action wrench like this that goes actually inside of the action that we'll show on today's video. You're also going to need some torque wrenches. I would recommend a couple different styles of torque wrenches. For one, you're going to need something that's going to be a low torque wrench, something like a fat wrench, something that goes from like 10 to 40 to 50 inch-pounds. That's what we're going to use to install like our scope base, our chassis, all that stuff is a really low torque. But you will also need a heavier torque wrench. You're going to need something that's going to give a little bit more oomph to it. Something that's going to be up to, let's say, 100 foot-pound torque wrench. Do you have to use a torque wrench? Maybe not. I guess you could build the whole thing without a torque wrench. Just like I could build a whole car and I could put your wheels on without torquing them down. But there's risk associated with that. And this is a giant explosion happening, 5 inches in front of my face. I would want to make sure the barrel is torqued down. And I want to make sure that my fancy scope on top of this gun isn't going to come flying off. So I would highly recommend torque everything down. In my mind, for the most part, everything has a torque spec. Just up to you whether you want to follow that or not, or actually go through with that or not. So anyway, I've got all of our parts laid out, like I said. Like I've already said, I've got all of our parts laid out. I've already disassembled the whole gun. I know this will all go together really well. I know everything fits very well, so that kind of makes my life a little bit easier. As far as an action goes, we are using a American Rifle Company Nucleus action. Super nice action. I really like it. It is a 3-lug action. We'll talk more about that and what that means in a second. For trigger tech trigger, using a Criterion barrel, a Aero Precision Soulless chassis, Atlas bipod, Vortex Strike Eagle scope. So nothing too crazy with this build. Like I said, it's just kind of one of my spared 308 trainer guns. So it's not super fancy. It gets the job done. It works really, really well, and it shoots amazing. So we're going to kind of just go and get started and start the build process. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about our action, which is kind of the heart of the whole gun. It's kind of what makes it special and unique. There are custom actions. So for example, this, like I said, is a American Rifle Company Nucleus action. It's a custom action. There are lots of different custom actions out there, and you can even use a factory action if you want. There's nothing really wrong with that necessarily. The only problem with using a factory action, usually you're going to have a little bit more slop. On top of that, typically a factory fit and finish of everything really on a factory action typically isn't as well. If I was to start off on a factory action, what I would recommend be something like a Bergara action or a Tikka action. A lot of people use Howa actions. Those are all good foundations to start if you're going to use a factory action. If you're going to use a custom action like this, there are countless of really good companies, from Zero Bite Arms to American Rifle Company to Defiance to there's so many good companies out there. Just kind of pick one throw a dart on a board, and you pretty much can't go wrong with really any one of them. This is a Remington 700 clone, which is what most custom actions are. So the trigger is a standard Remington 700 trigger. It is a bolt pattern of a chassis for a Remington 700. The inlet is a Remington 700 inlet. It's really nice, so I get all of the pros, really none of the cons, I guess you could say. I can buy whatever chassis, buy whatever trigger, do whatever I want for the most part, and still have a really good action at the core of the rifle. So putting a Remington 700 trigger in is super simple. I have my 2 pins. I have already started my 2 pins in their hole because it makes my life a little bit easier. All I have to do is insert the trigger. This shoe of the trigger will go towards the front, so the trigger will go in this direction. You will also see that my safety catch, or my safety cutout on my action, also cut out for this side, so it just fits just like so into the action. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and let's install our trigger. Got my 2 pins already started here, and let's see if we can put this in real quick. Okay, first pin is started. Go ahead and rock our trigger into place. Make sure everything's looking good. Once that's in, I'm going to go ahead and test it, make sure it goes on safe and fire, and make sure it actually fires and drops the firing pin spring. So I'm in fire right now. Went off just good. Yep. Go to safe, make sure it works. No, don't work. Go back to fire. There we go. Just like that. Trigger is installed in our action. So now we're ready to put our barrel onto our action. And to do this, this is where our barrel vise comes into play. It's going to be holding our barrel really, really tightly so we can torque our action down to spec. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to throw this bad boy up in here. You can see there's leather in between the clamps. Just kind of helps keep the barrel from being damaged. If you had like a Cerakote barrel, it'd be even more crucial for that. For me, I run stainless stuff most of the time because I don't really care. But that's just me. I did have a Cerakote, which I've done Cerakote barrels before and torqued them down. The leather, I'm worried wouldn't be enough. It would leave marks, so I would use a piece of paper also around the barrel. So I would just wrap the barrel in paper, then use the leather, and then clamp it down really, really tightly. So we're gonna go ahead and we're going to tighten it down. Pretty simple. I like to go across, try and really make sure it torques down this barrel evenly. Okay, that should be good enough. I wouldn't recommend putting a lot of anything on this. I wouldn't use Loctite. I wouldn't use anything really other than oil. I really like using oil when putting stuff together and torquing it down, just because it gives it some lubrication, make sure it doesn't gold up the threads, make sure my threads are clean on the inside of my action. A big thing you don't want to forget is make sure you grab your recoil lug and put it on. If you forget your recoil lug, it won't head space up properly. It won't even really go on your chassis, so make sure you grab your barrel lug and put it on at the same time. One thing I am going to do real quick is I'm just going to lightly thread in my scope base, because for my action, the scope base is what kind of times the recoil lug. So just to make my life easy, I'm just going to install this. I'm going to take it right back off to put Loctite on it. This is just so I can use it as an alignment aid. So my recoil lug can now fit nice and neatly into my action. Just like I said, gonna make my life a whole lot easier when putting this in. Just thread our action on. It's good there. Go ahead, this is where our action wrench comes into play. I'm going to grab my action wrench And for me, it's time to make sure I get this flat side on the bottom. Put my action wrench. Come on. Come on, Dan. There you go. That's in. It's the first time we're going to be using our torque wrench. For this one, every action and barrel's different. Every company's different. I've seen some barrel manufacturers say to torque to over 100 and some say 40 foot-pounds. It's nothing too crazy. You know, I definitely would talk to your action maker and see what they say. But for me, I typically go 65 to 70 foot-pounds on pretty much all my stuff. Never had one back off. That's more than enough torque to hold it down. So, and plus I want to be able to get it off easily later on. Now I might take a barrel off and on. You know, I've got multiple barrels for the same action, let's say. And so I might have this barrel off in a few months to put my 6.5 Creed barrel on, or my 6.5 by 47 Lapua barrel on. So I don't want to just torque this down to the moon and then never be able to get it off. So a nice happy medium, like I said, 70-ish foot-pounds around there. That's kind of what I like to go with to make my life easy. Just like that. And that's torqued down. Little fun fact on your torque wrenches, back them down. You're done with them. Action is now torqued down. Everything should be good. We have one thing we've got to check though before we call this done. We got to check the headspace. So I'll be right back. So how to get my headspace gauges. Always got to have these. These are a must-have tool when doing this, in my opinion. Even if you're going to buy a pre-fit barrel, which is what this is, we torqued it down, and that's all we have to do. And there are some barrels that you have a barrel nut that you can headspace yourself and do it that way. Both are great options. This is simple because theoretically this should be good. I can't adjust this unless you have a lathe, you send it back to your gunsmith. They have to make this for this action or for your action. So all our headspace gauges are going to do is they're going to basically make sure that the dimensions of the chamber are correct off of our bolt. So it bottoms out on our bolt here, and does it headspace on the other end inside the barrel correctly? And that's the big question. So I've got a no and a go-go. So I've got a go and a no-go gauge. The go gauge should break over and close just fine. The no-go gauge should be really, really tight, and I can't close it with a pipe wrench. You know, so hopefully that's what happens. I'm gonna go ahead and put our, make sure everything closes. Got my bolt in. Everything seems great so far. I'm going to go ahead and grab my go gauge. So this should close the bolt just fine, perfectly smooth. Perfectly smooth, closes down. The no-go gauge should be tight and can't close it. Okay. And it doesn't close. It's too tight. Can't close it. That's good. The go gauge goes and the no-go gauge doesn't go. Crazy how that works. Just tells us the chamber inside this barrel is correct. When you buy headspace gauges, you can see that a lot of times they are for multiple different cartridges or calibers. So for example, this is for a 243, a 308, 708, anything that's going to share a 308 headspace measurement. I've got 6.5 Creedmoor headspace gauges. That would work for 6.5 Creed, 6mm Creed, 25 Creed, 22 Creed, any one of the Creedmoor family cartridges. If you had a headspace, so it's somewhat normal to have one headspace gauge set work for multiple different cartridges, because there are a lot of different cartridges that use the same headspace dimension. And we're talking about from back of the case to the shoulder line. We don't care how long the cartridge is. We care about where's the shoulder line, where's it budded up inside the chamber to seal up the chamber from pressure. So That being said, our barrel to action is for the most part all assembled. All we have to do is put our scope base and, or at least Loctite our scope base on. And that's pretty much done from this point. So let's move on to the next step. Okay, so now the fun part. Now we get to drop the barrel to action into a chassis. The fun part of this is that now it starts looking like a real rifle. Now it starts looking like it's a complete setup. To do this, it's relatively simple. I only have 2 screws and a recoil lug I have to line up with my chassis. So my 2 screws and a recoil lug. So to make my life easy, I'm going to flip my barrel to action upside down. I'm going to drop my action in. Come on. There it goes. I'm going to start both of these bolts. Like I said, I'm just going to start them and back them out a little bit, because there's going to be play from the barrel to action to the chassis. Pretty much every rifle is going to have it, unless you have bedded a stock or a chassis to that barrel to action. They're pretty much always going to have play, and the play that I'm talking about is front and backwards. I don't know if you can see that good on camera. Probably can hear it really well. But there's a little bit of play, not a lot, and you're probably talking, eighth of an inch, or a little over 100 thousandths or so. Not a lot, but enough. And what happens if you don't take that play up is it could give you some accuracy inconsistencies, because that barrel to action is actually moving and it's not firmly butted up against that chassis. You can't just rely the bolts on holding it in place. You got to have lugs on it for it to kind of hit against and bottom out on. Think of it like a scope rail, as if you have lugs on a scope rail so that it keeps the scope not just firmly tightened, but also keeps it from being able to move forward or backwards. So, same thing with this. To do that, I like to take the chassis, put it up on a table, and I'm going to just tap it a couple times, firmly press down on the barrel to action to try and keep it firmly planted against the recoil lug, and for now just snug our 2 bolts down. Then I'm going to grab my torque wrench and I'm going to torque it on down. I've already preset it for our torque spec. Now it's torqued. There we go. Go back over them. Okay. And just like that, our barrel to action is installed, and now it's starting to look like a complete setup. What's also nice, once you get the chassis on, we can go ahead and I can throw on the bipod, and we can set it up on the table to make it a little bit easier to work with now. So that's kind of the nice thing. Okay, now I went ahead and took our scope base back off, because now we have to reinstall it the proper way now. You can see now where the indentation is. That lines up my recoil lug really well now. So for me, I had to install it kind of to line up my recoil lug properly. Most of the time you don't have to do that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put our scope base on. It's really recommended before you get started though. We're going to go ahead actually, and I'm going to give it a good wipe down to make sure there's no oils or grease on the top of the action. I've already wiped down the scope rail really well. I'm going to go ahead and just put our rail on. I'm just going to start our bolts. And what I'm going to do basically is remove one at a time, Loctite it, and then torque it down. But I want to make sure they're all in perfect alignment. That's why I started them all, ran them all down. And I'm going to basically work from the center out. So I'm going to remove the center one, blue Loctite it, put it back down, torque it down, go to the outside ones, kind of just slowly work our way out. So, all that snug down. Just a little dab on there. Especially this being 308 and it has a big old muzzle brake on it. Bolts are just really known to try and come loose. So, really want to make sure everything's good. Most torque specs on most scope rails anyway are like 15 to 20, maybe 25 inch-pounds. Yet again, contact either your action company that makes the scope base or the company that makes the scope base on the instructions. It'll tell you what torque spec to go to. So, but usually, like I said, 15, 25 inch-pounds, somewhere around there is good. And when I get the last one all torqued, we can go back over all of them. Just like that. Let's go bases on. So up next is going to be installing our scope, which is pretty simple. Nothing too crazy on this. I've already got the scope on the rings. All I gotta do is just throw it back on. So I'm not really gonna talk a whole lot about how to install a scope, other than you put it on, torque her down. There we go. Just like a chassis, we have to kind of set the scope on the rail. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm just gonna snug these down. Just barely. I'm gonna snug them down, back them off just to make sure they're all aligned. Back it off. Do our last one. Screw it down. Back it off. Just like before, we talked about how the barreled action has play in the chassis. The scope will also have play on your scope rail. You probably can hear that little bit of play. Probably can't see it because this is even less. But on the scope, I want to push the scope forward and then tighten it up. Just gonna snug them down just so they won't move. Got my torque wrench, which is already set up. See that? Had the bit in it. Okay, scope is installed. Okay, so we really only have one thing left, and that's a muzzle device. You could use a suppressor, you can use muzzle brake, whatever you want to do. For me, this being a 308, trying to be a PRS competition gun, I've got a big honkin' 4-port brake. This is the Area 419 Sidewinder, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. But whatever you do, you got to put something on the end of those threads. You know, don't be a FUD. Don't leave a blank, unless maybe it's like an F class gun. Then you have to put something cool. Put a brake, put a suppressor, put something. This is a self-timing brake, super nice. Really like Area 419 stuff. Pretty easy to install it. I'm going to go ahead and grab the rifle. Hopefully this is still all in frame. I'm going to actually put the gun between my legs here. Thread down my adapter, and I'm going to torque it down. There is not a torque spec for this. I know I've been harping on torque specs, but that's the one thing I don't typically torque down, because they are a pain to get off, I'm not gonna lie. And all I have to do is just now thread this on. It's kind of one of the things I like about Area 419's stuff. Just make sure it's somewhat timed how I want it to be. Pick up the gun. See if it's somewhat lined up. Appears to be pretty good. Go ahead and lock that sucker down. Looks like that. Brakes installed. Well guys, there you have it. That's how you build the precision bolt gun. It's not hard, it's not rocket science or rocket surgery. It's really honestly pretty easy, surprisingly easy. I would say building a bolt gun is even easier than building like an AR. There's so less pieces, it's pretty hard to screw up. The only thing that really you could screw up, that you really got to watch for, is the head spacing. Make sure that's always right. Make sure you buy some headspace gauges, some go and no-go gauges, some quality ones. But other than that, honestly, it's pretty easy. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you learned something. Hope you gained something out of this. If you have any questions, drop a comment down below. I'll try my best to answer it. But other than that, guys, be sure to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. You guys know how it goes. But I'm going to do some shooting.